The millionaire saw his pregnant ex-wife working as a waitress at his wedding. What he did. The reflection in the mirror of the women's bathroom at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Manhattan didn't lie. Charlotte Bennett adjusted the black bow of her waitress uniform as her hand unconsciously slid over her prominent 8-month-old belly. The luxurious ballroom on the 42nd floor awaited her with hundreds of guests dressed in designer clothes and jewelry that cost more than she would earn in a lifetime. "You don't have to do this," Melissa, her co-worker, whispered, adjusting the tray of hors d'oeuvres. "I can cover your industry." Charlotte shook her head, determined. "I need the money. Besides, it's just another wedding." The lie burned in his throat. It wasn't just another wedding. It was the wedding of Alexander Crawford, the man she had loved madly and who had abandoned her 6 months ago. Fate had a peculiar sense of humor. After weeks of looking for a job in New York, the only company that accepted a pregnant waitress was precisely the one that would serve at her child's father's wedding. Charlotte had no choice. The back rent and medical bills wouldn't wait for her dignity to recover. The hall glowed in shades of gold and ivory. Elaborate arrangements of white orchids decorated the tables, and Swarovski crystals hung from the ceiling in sparkling cascades. Charlotte moved with precision among the guests, serving champagne and hors d'oeuvres, keeping her eyes downcast to avoid being recognized. Alexander stood in the center of the room, impeccable in his Armani tuxedo, talking to a group of executives. His dark brown hair was perfectly combed, and his smile, that same smile that had melted his defenses a year ago, lit up his face as he laughed at some corporate joke. "The groom looks amazing, doesn't he?" commented a nearby guest, adjusting her pearl necklace. "The Crawford family finally got what they wanted, a union with the Richardsons. Just imagine the empire these two fortunes will create." Charlotte felt her stomach drop, and it wasn't just the baby moving. She vividly remembered the day that Gregory Crawford, the family patriarch, had called her into his office. "My son needs someone of his social standing," he had said with calculated coldness. "You're a waitress from Denver, honey. What can you offer other than a scandal?" That same night, Alexander ended everything. "It's better this way," he said, without looking into her eyes. "We are from different worlds." 2 weeks later, the tabloids announced his engagement to Madison Richardson, heiress to a pharmaceutical fortune. The baby kicked hard, as if sensing his father's proximity. Charlotte took a deep breath, adjusting the tray. She had not yet told Alexander about the pregnancy. The discovery came a week after their separation, and her wounded pride prevented her from looking for him. Furthermore, after seeing how his family treated her, she feared for her son's future in that world of appearances and manipulations. "Everyone to their seats," announced the event coordinator. "The bride is coming." Charlotte positioned herself next to one of the marble columns, trying to make herself invisible. The music started playing, and Madison Richardson appeared at the entrance of the ballroom, ethereal in her Vera Wang gown. Alexander waited at the makeshift altar, his smile not reaching his eyes. That's when it happened. As she poured a final glass of champagne, Charlotte lost her balance slightly. The sudden movement made his tray wobble, catching Alexander's attention. Their eyes met for the first time in 6 months, and time seemed to freeze. She saw the exact moment his green eyes registered her face, went down to her uniform and stopped, wide open, on her stomach. The glass in his hand slipped, shattering on the marble floor. The sound of crystal breaking echoed through the hall, interrupting the wedding march. "Alex?" Madison's voice sounded confused from down the hall. But Alexander remained motionless, his face a mask of shock and understanding. Charlotte could see the gears turning in her mind, calculating the months, connecting the dots. Her perfectly orchestrated world was crumbling under the force of a single truth she had held onto for so long. Gregory Crawford was the first to react, his face red with fury as he recognized her. He started to approach, but Alexander raised his hand, stopping him. The silent gesture carried the weight of years of submission being broken in an instant. Charlotte felt her panic rising. This wasn't the plan. She was supposed to remain anonymous, do her job and leave. Now, hundreds of curious glances alternated between her and her fiancé. Whispers filled the air, and cell phone cameras began to appear. "Shah!" Alexander's voice was hoarse, almost inaudible. She didn't wait to hear the rest. Leaving the tray on a nearby table, Charlotte turned and walked as quickly as her condition allowed toward the service doors. Behind her, he heard the commotion grow, raised voices, hurried footsteps, the high-pitched sound of Madison's voice demanding an explanation. As she waited for the service elevator, Charlotte allowed a single tear to fall. Her son moved again, as if trying to comfort her. "It's okay, little one," she whispered, rubbing her belly. "We'll be fine." The elevator doors opened and she walked in, knowing that her life was about to change drastically. The secret she had kept for so long was exposed, and there was no turning back. In the reflection of the metal doors, Charlotte saw the image of a different woman from the one who had arrived at the hotel hours before, no longer a victim of circumstances, but someone who had unwittingly turned the tide. The elevator began to descend, taking her away from the chaos she had left behind. In the lounge on the 42nd floor, Alexander Crawford was about to make the most important choice of his life, and this time it wouldn't be his parents who decided for him. Alexander Crawford remained frozen at the altar, his gaze fixed on the spot where Charlotte had disappeared moments before. The murmur of the guests rose like a wave, filling the luxurious ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel with speculation and scandalized whispers. Madison Richardson, still in her wedding dress, had been ushered into an adjoining room by her mother and bridesmaids, her sobs echoing through the halls. "This is unacceptable," thundered Gregory Crawford, approaching his son. His normally controlled face was contorted with fury. "You're not going to ruin everything because of that waitress." But Alexander barely listened. His mind was filled with memories. Charlotte's shy smile when they met in Denver, the nights talking about his dreams, the way she made him feel truly alive for the first time in his controlled life. And now, the image of her carrying her child, her son, under that waitress uniform pierced his consciousness like a dagger. "How much did you pay her to show up today?" Gregory's sharp voice interrupted his thoughts. "It must have been a considerable amount of money to put on this little show." Alexander finally turned to his father, years of pent-up resentment spilling over into his words. "She's pregnant, Dad. 8 months from what I can tell. Do the math." The silence that followed was deafening. Gregory Crawford paled, realizing the implications. Barbara Crawford, who until then had watched the scene with aristocratic horror, approached her husband. "Dear, the guests." "To hell with the guests," Alexander exploded, ripping off his bow tie. "I need to find her." He headed for the service doors, ignoring his parents' calls and the occasional flash of cell phone cameras. In the service hallway, he met Melissa, the waitress who worked with Charlotte. "Where did she go?" Melissa hesitated, clearly torn between loyalty to her friend and the pressure of the moment. "She needs this job, Mr. Crawford. Please." "I just want to talk to her." Alexander softened his tone, realizing his aggressive approach wouldn't help. "She's carrying my son. I need to make things right." Something in his voice must have convinced Melissa, who sighed. "She probably went to the staff locker room in the basement. But don't say I told you." Alexander practically ran up the service stairs, refusing to wait for the elevator. As he took the steps 2 at a time, his mind swirled with questions. Why hadn't Charlotte told her about the pregnancy? How had she ended up working on her own marriage? And more importantly, how could he have been so cowardly as to let her go 6 months ago? In the employee locker room, he found Charlotte sitting on a bench, trying to control her breathing. She looked up when she heard him enter, and he could see the mix of fear and determination in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" was the first thing he managed to say. Charlotte let out a bitter laugh. "Tell? When, Alex? When did you break up with me over the phone? Or when I saw in the magazines your engagement to Madison 2 weeks later?" Every word was like a blow, reminding him of his own failings. "I would have helped. I would have done something. How did your parents help keep me away from you?" she interrupted, standing up with difficulty. No, thank you. My son doesn't need to grow up in this toxic world. Our son, Alexander corrected softly, taking a step towards him. It's our son, Char. The vulnerability in his voice made Charlotte falter. For a moment, she saw again the man she had fallen in love with. Not the Crawford heir, but simply Alex, who liked jazz and preferred hamburgers to caviar. You're about to get married, she reminded him, both to him and to herself. No, I'm not, he replied, with a certainty that surprised her. Actually, I don't think I ever really have been. The baby chose this moment to move, and Charlotte instinctively reached for her belly. Alexander watched the gesture with fascination and pain. Can I? He asked hesitantly, holding out his hand. Charlotte nodded after a moment of hesitation. When he touched her belly, the baby responded with a strong kick, as if recognizing his father's presence. He's fussy, Charlotte commented softly, especially at night. Him? Alexander asked, his voice breaking. Yes, a boy. The moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching heels. Madison appeared in the doorway, her face streaked with tears and anger. So that's it? She asked, her voice shaking. Our whole future thrown away because of a bastard son. Madison, Alexander warned sternly, instinctively placing himself between her and Charlotte. Don't worry, Charlotte said, composing herself. I was already leaving. I just came to get my things. She started to collect her bag, but Alexander gently grabbed her arm. Don't go. Please. We need to talk about this. About us. The hallway was beginning to fill with people. Gregory and Barbara Crawford, Madison's parents, hotel security guards. It was a surreal scene. The bride in her designer dress, the groom still in his tux, and the pregnant waitress in the middle of it all. Miss Bennett, Gregory Crawford's voice sounded authoritative. How much do you want to keep this private? Name your price. Charlotte squared her shoulders, years of humiliation turning into strength. I'm not for sale, Mr. Crawford. I never have been. Nor my son, Alexander added, intertwining his fingers with Charlotte's. It's over, Dad. The control, the manipulations, everything. The gesture did not go unnoticed by Madison, who let out a scream of frustration and ran away, her parents in pursuit. Barbara Crawford looked ready to faint, while Gregory was livid with rage. You'll regret this, Alexander, he threatened. Think carefully about what you're throwing away. No, Alexander replied calmly. For the first time in my life, I'm thinking about what really matters. The warmth of Charlotte's hand in his was like an anchor, keeping him firm in his decision. He knew there would be consequences, scandalous headlines, possible lawsuits, certainly a fight over the inheritance. But looking at Charlotte and thinking about the son growing inside her, Alexander finally understood that some things were worth any price. News of the Crawfords' interrupted marriage spread like wildfire across Manhattan. The next morning, sensationalist headlines dominated the tabloids. Real estate heir abandons bride at altar for pregnant waitress. The baby that rocked the Crawford empire. Forbidden romance resurfaces in $1 million wedding. Charlotte watched the news in her small Queens apartment, sitting at her worn breakfast table. His phone was ringing off the hook, reporters, TV shows, even a few lawyers offering legal representation. She rejected all calls. You need to see this, Alexander said, walking into the kitchen with his laptop. He had spent the night on the couch, refusing to leave her alone after the chaos of the day before. He was still wearing his wrinkled wedding shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. On the screen, an official statement from Crawford Enterprises announced his temporary resignation as vice president. In light of recent personal events involving Alexander Crawford, the board of directors has unanimously decided. Your father worked quickly, Charlotte commented, pouring more chamomile tea into her cup. Alexander closed the laptop with more force than necessary. He thinks he can pressure me financially, as if money is all that matters. For them, it is, she replied softly, remembering the countless times Gregory Crawford had made that clear. Alex, you don't have to destroy your life for us. I can raise this baby on my own. He crossed the small kitchen in 2 strides, kneeling beside her. You still don't understand? My life only really began when I met you in Denver. Everything else, the company, the expectations, the arranged marriage, was just a gilded prison. The baby moved, as if responding to his father's words. Charlotte took Alexander's hand and placed it on her belly. He always gets excited when he hears your voice. A genuine smile lit up his face. Have you chosen a name yet? Nathan, she replied. Nathan Bennett. Or Crawford, depending on how things turn out. The moment was interrupted by knocks on the door. Charlotte tensed instantly. Ever since the incident at the wedding, every unexpected sound had made her alert. Alexander stood protectively. Must be another reporter. I'll handle it. But when he opened the door, he found Barbara Crawford, elegant even at 8 in the morning, her face a mask of artificial composure. Mom, Alexander said, surprised. How did you find this address? I'm your mother, darling. I have my resources. She looked past him, spotting Charlotte in the kitchen. Can I come in? We need to talk like adults. Charlotte nodded hesitantly, and Barbara entered, surveying the modest apartment with a gaze that tried not to appear judgmental. Charlotte, she began, sitting gracefully on the worn couch, I've come to offer a proposition. Your baby is a Crawford, regardless of the circumstances. She deserves the best money can buy. Mom, don't. Alexander tried to interfere, but Barbara raised her hand. Let me finish. I'm willing to help. A suitable Upper East Side apartment, bank account for the baby, the best doctors. In return, we need to keep a low profile, no interviews or public exposure. Charlotte felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the pregnancy. What about Alex? Alexander needs to focus on his career now. The board may reconsider his removal if he demonstrates maturity in his choices. Enough! Alexander exploded. Don't you guys understand that you can't control every aspect of my life? I don't want a deal, I don't want discretion, and I definitely don't want to go back to that empty life. Barbara Crawford turned pale. In her 40 years of marriage to Gregory, she had rarely seen such direct rebellion. You're throwing it all away, she whispered. All your future. No, Mom. I'm finally choosing my own future. Alexander approached Charlotte, wrapping his arms around her shoulders protectively. With the woman I love and my son. Unexpected tears shone in Barbara's eyes. For a moment, her mask of aristocratic perfection faltered, and Charlotte glimpsed something surprising. Vulnerability. I was once young and in love too, Barbara said softly. But love doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't guarantee the future. Maybe not, Charlotte replied, finding courage somewhere deep. But money doesn't buy true happiness. Look at your own marriage, Mrs. Crawford. The silence that followed was deafening. Barbara stood up abruptly, adjusting her Chanel coat. Think carefully, Alexander. Your father won't give in easily. After his departure, Charlotte collapsed on the couch, exhausted. This will never end, will it? They'll never accept us. Alexander sat down next to her, pulling her into his arms. We don't need their acceptance. We can build our own lives, our way. How? She asked, vulnerable. You just lost your job, and I'm a pregnant waitress without a college degree. I have some savings of my own that my father can't touch, and most importantly, he smiled, kissing her forehead, I have a plan. Charlotte looked up, curious. What plan? Denver, he replied simply. Where it all started. I can use my contacts to start my own development company there. Smaller, more ethical, focused on sustainable housing. Would you leave New York? For me? For us, he corrected, his hand resting on her stomach. What do you say? Ready to start over with me? The baby kicked, as if giving its own answer. Charlotte smiled, feeling for the first time in months that maybe, just maybe, everything could work out. A week after their interrupted marriage, Charlotte and Alexander found themselves in a doctor's office in Manhattan, awaiting the last ultrasound before moving to Denver. Dr. Marcus Phillips, a renowned obstetrician whom Alexander had insisted on seeing, was closely examining the monitor as he slid the transducer over Charlotte's belly. "The baby is in a perfect position," commented the doctor, adjusting the image. "And from what I see, very healthy. Do you want to listen to the heart?" Alexander squeezed Charlotte's hand as the loud, rhythmic sound filled the room. Her eyes filled with tears as she realized she was experiencing for the first time something she should have shared throughout her pregnancy. 140 beats per minute, Dr. Phillips reported, exactly as expected for 32 weeks. "What about the trip?" Alexander asked, his concern evident. "Is it safe to fly at this stage?" The doctor smiled reassuringly. "With the necessary precautions, yes, but I suggest you make the change as soon as possible. After 34 weeks, airlines begin to impose restrictions." As she wiped the gel off her belly, Charlotte reflected on how drastically her life had changed in just 7 days. The media still hounded them, but the focus had shifted from the initial scandal to speculation about the future of the Crawford empire. The company's shares had fallen 12% after the announcement of Alexander's departure, and rumors about a possible family dispute over the inheritance were multiplying. Leaving the office, they walked to a discreet cafe a few blocks away. Autumn in New York painted the trees with golden hues, and a cool breeze rustled the fallen leaves on the sidewalk. "I have a surprise," Alexander announced as they settled into a table in the back. He took his tablet out of his briefcase and turned it toward Charlotte. "What do you think?" On the screen, the image of a 2-story modern colonial-style house appeared on a spacious lot. The large windows and front porch gave a welcoming feel to the property, located in Cherry Creek, one of Denver's most charming neighborhoods. "Alex," Charlotte began hesitantly, "that seems too expensive." "It's an investment in our future," he argued softly. 3 bedrooms, an office that can be converted into a baby's room, a yard for Nathan to play in. And the best part? It's 10 minutes from the center, where I intend to establish the developer's office. A waitress came over to take their order, a decaf chai latte for Charlotte and a double espresso for Alexander. When she walked away, Charlotte finally voiced what had been worrying her for days. "What if it doesn't work out? If your father manages to block your contacts, if no one wants to do business with you after the scandal?" Alexander leaned across the table, holding her hands. "Remember that sustainable housing project I developed last year? The one my dad rejected because it wasn't profitable enough?" Charlotte nodded. It was one of the first topics they had discussed when they met in Denver during an architecture event where she was working as a waitress. "Well, I pitched the project to some independent investors," he continued, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. 3 of them showed interest. One of them, in fact, is from Denver and wants to be the first to implement the concept. "That's amazing," Charlotte smiled, feeling some of her anxiety melt away. "And there's more," Alexander continued, taking another document from his briefcase. "Remember your old boss in Denver, Rebecca Morton? Apparently she's expanded her events company and is in need of an administrative coordinator." Charlotte blinked in surprise. "Did you talk to Becca?" "Actually, she came to me after seeing the news. She said she always regretted losing you to New York and that the position is yours, if you want it. Flexible work, possibility of working from home after Nathan's birth." The tears Charlotte had been holding back began to fall. "You thought of everything, didn't you?" "I tried," he admitted, gently wiping away her tears with his thumb. "I know I can't erase the last 6 months, but I can try to build a better future for the 3 of us." The moment was interrupted by Alexander's cell phone. Gregory Crawford's name flashed on the screen. It was his father's 15th call that week. "Aren't you going to answer?" Charlotte asked, noticing his hesitation. Alexander hung up the phone. "There's nothing he can say that will change my decision. Our move is scheduled for Monday, and until then, I'd rather focus on what really matters." "Your parents aren't just going to give up," she warned, "especially with a Crawford grandchild on the way." "I know," he sighed, "but this time I'm prepared. I've already spoken to a lawyer who specializes in family law. If they try anything related to Nathan's custody, we'll be protected." Charlotte felt the baby move, as she always did when she was anxious. Alexander noticed her expression and immediately changed the subject, pulling out the tablet again. "Look at the room that could be Nathan's," he showed, moving on to other photos of the house. "There's a perfect tree in the backyard for a tree house when he grows up. And that deck out back? Imagine the barbecues we can have on the weekends." Watching Alexander talk excitedly about his plans, Charlotte felt a rush of love so intense it almost hurt. This was the man she had fallen in love with, not the Crawford heir, but someone who dreamed of tree houses and Sunday barbecues. "Monday, then?" she asked, interrupting his enthusiastic monologue about solar energy systems. "Monday," he confirmed, leaning down to kiss her softly. "A new beginning." Outside the cafe, the golden leaves continued to fall, marking the end of one season and the beginning of another. In a few days they would leave New York and all its suffocating glamour behind, exchanging skyscrapers for mountains, family expectations for dreams of their own. The path wouldn't be easy, but for the first time since discovering she was pregnant, Charlotte felt like she was moving in the right direction. Arriving in Denver brought with it a bittersweet feeling for Charlotte. The city held memories both sweet and bitter. The first meeting with Alexander at a sustainable architecture exhibition, the carefree strolls through the botanical gardens, and also the searing pain when he left for New York, giving in to family pressures. Now, temporarily ensconced in a boutique hotel in Cherry Creek, while they waited for the home purchase to be finalized, Charlotte gazed out at the Rocky Mountain skyline through the picture window. Alexander had left early for a meeting with investors interested in his sustainable housing project, leaving her alone with her thoughts and a particularly agitated Nathan. "Miss Bennett?" The hotel receptionist called the room, her voice hesitant. "There's a lady at the front desk insisting on seeing you. She says she's Barbara Crawford." Charlotte's heart jumped. After a week of silence since their meeting in New York, her mother-in-law's presence in Denver could only spell trouble. "You can direct her to the hotel restaurant," Charlotte replied, after a moment of reflection. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Adjusting the maternal dress that barely managed to disguise her 8 months of pregnancy, Charlotte went down to the hotel's elegant restaurant. Barbara Crawford sat at an inconspicuous table in the back, her impeccable posture contrasting with a subtle fatigue in her eyes. "Charlotte," Barbara greeted, indicating the chair in front of her. "I hope I'm not interrupting your day." "How did you find us?" Charlotte asked directly, sitting down carefully. "Alexander was always predictable in his choices," Barbara replied, a sad smile playing on her lips. "This was his favorite hotel when he visited Denver for work. Also," she hesitated, "I've been in touch with Rebecca Morton." The mention of Charlotte's old boss took her by surprise. "The job offer, was it your idea?" Barbara ordered tea for both of them before answering. "Partially. Rebecca really wants you back. I just facilitated communication." Charlotte studied the woman in front of her, trying to decipher her true intentions. "Why?" "Because," Barbara sighed deeply, "unlike Gregory, I can recognize when a battle is lost, and more importantly, I can see when my son is truly happy." The waiter served tea, providing a moment of pause in the busy conversation. Charlotte noticed that Barbara's hands were shaking slightly as she held the cup. "Gregory sued to invalidate my father's will," Barbara continued, her voice low. "The old will guaranteed Alexander a significant portion of the company's shares, regardless of his personal choices. Gregory wants to change that." "And you came to warn us?" Charlotte asked in disbelief. "I came to offer an alternative." Barbara placed a folder of documents on the table. "These are the deeds to a property in Aspen that belongs solely to me. My family's inheritance. I'm transferring it into Nathan's name." Charlotte felt the baby move, as if responding to the mention of her name. "Mrs. Crawford." "Barbara, please," she interrupted softly. "I'm going to be your son's grandmother after all." "Barbara," Charlotte corrected, excited. "Why are you doing this?" Barbara's mask of composure finally gave way, revealing a vulnerability Charlotte never imagined seeing. "Because 40 years ago, I too had to choose between love and money. I chose money, married Gregory, and spent decades trying to convince myself that I had made the right choice. Silent tears ran down Barbara's carefully made-up face. When I saw you at that wedding, carrying my grandson, wearing that uniform with so much dignity, I saw the woman I could have been if I had had your courage. Charlotte reached out her hand, holding Barbara's. The simple gesture seemed to surprise them both. Alexander doesn't know you're here, does he? Barbara discreetly dried her tears with a silk handkerchief. No, and I'd rather it stay that way for now. Gregory can't know about the transfer of ownership until it's finalized. He's going to be furious, Charlotte observed. Let it be, Barbara replied with surprising firmness. I've allowed him to control our lives for too long. The sound of Charlotte's phone interrupted the conversation. It was Alexander, announcing that the meeting had ended early and that he was on his way to the hotel. He's coming, Charlotte informed him, noticing how Barbara immediately composed herself. Then that's my cue. She stood up gracefully. The documents just need your signature. My lawyer will be in touch to finalize the details. Before leaving, Barbara hesitated, looking at Charlotte's belly. May I? Charlotte nodded, thrilled, allowing her son's grandmother to touch her belly for the first time. Nathan responded with a vigorous kick. He has the Crawford temperament, Barbara commented with a genuine smile. But I hope I have your heart, Charlotte. When Alexander arrived 15 minutes later, he found Charlotte still sitting at the table, the Aspen estate documents tucked away in her purse like a precious secret. Is everything okay? He asked, noticing your teary eyes. Charlotte smiled, pulling him into a soft kiss. Yes, I think everything is finally okay. Outside the hotel, Barbara Crawford got into her rental car, feeling a decades-old weight being lifted from her shoulders. Maybe it was too late for her own love story, but it wasn't too late to help write a different ending for her son. Alexander's temporary office in Denver still smelled like fresh paint. Through the wide windows of the 10th floor, the Rocky Mountains rose majestically against the October sky. On his desk, architectural plans for Crawford Sustainable Development's first project lay spread out, full of notes and modifications. Investors loved the changes to the green condominium design, commented Marcus Chen, a young local architect whom Alexander had hired the previous week, especially the inclusion of integrated solar panels and the rainwater collection system. Alexander smiled, satisfied. After 3 weeks in Denver, the pieces were starting to fall into place. The small team he was assembling shared his vision of sustainable development, and the first contracts were being finalized. His phone vibrated, another message from Gregory Crawford. Since Barbara's surprise visit 2 weeks ago, her father has alternated between veiled threats and attempts at reconciliation. Alexander systematically ignored them. I need to take a break, he announced, reaching for his coat. Charlotte has a prenatal appointment in half an hour. Sure, boss, Marcus joked. Say hi to the mom-to-be. Dr. Patricia Walsh's office was just a 10-minute drive away. Alexander found Charlotte already in the waiting room, absently leafing through a decoration magazine. Sorry I'm late, he said, kissing her softly. How are you two? Nathan is restless today, she replied, adjusting herself in her chair. And I've been having some Braxton Hicks contractions since yesterday. The immediate concern on Alexander's face made her smile. It's normal, love. Dr. Walsh already explained to me that they are training contractions. Charlotte Bennett, called the nurse. During the exam, Dr. Walsh maintained a professional expression as she checked Charlotte's vital signs and took Charlotte's blood pressure. The pressure is a little high, she commented, taking notes. Have you been having headaches, bloating beyond normal? Charlotte hesitated. A little. I thought it was normal for the 3rd trimester. Maybe, the doctor replied cautiously, but with your family history of preeclampsia, we need to monitor closely. I'll order some extra tests and want to see you again in a week. Alexander felt his heart tighten. Is this serious? It's just precaution, Dr. Walsh assured, but Charlotte needs to reduce her stress and get more rest. How's work at the events company going? I haven't started yet, Charlotte explained. Rebecca understood that it would be better to wait after the birth. Great decision, the doctor approved. Take advantage of these last few weeks to rest. The baby is in perfect position and at the right weight, but we need to keep you healthy too. Leaving the office, Alexander noticed that Charlotte was unusually quiet. "What's wrong?" he asked, holding your hand as they walked to the car. "It's just," she sighed. "Sometimes I feel so helpless. You're building an empire from scratch, and I can't even get to work." Alexander stopped, gently turning her to face him. "You are building something much more important, our son. And as for the empire," he smiled, "I'm building it for you too." The moment was interrupted by Charlotte's cell phone. It was Barbara Crawford. "Your mother has been calling a lot lately," Alexander commented curiously. Charlotte felt the weight of the Aspen estate documents, as yet unmentioned, on her conscience. "She's trying to get closer, I think." "That's good," he replied, surprising her. "Mom was always more malleable than my dad. Maybe she's finally finding her own voice." On the way home, they stopped at a small coffee shop that had become their favorite spot. The aroma of freshly ground coffee and artisan breads filled the welcoming atmosphere. "I have a surprise," Alexander announced, as they waited for their orders. "The house is ready. We can move in this weekend." Charlotte's eyes lit up. "Really? I thought there were still some adjustments left." "The team worked twice as hard," he explained. "I wanted us to be settled in before the baby was born. What's more, Rebecca helped me find a decorator who specializes in baby rooms. She can start on Monday if you like her ideas." Charlotte felt tears forming. The pregnancy hormones were making her especially emotional. "You think of everything, don't you?" "I try," he smiled, wiping away a tear that ran down her face. "Oh, and Marcus has an interesting idea for the home office. We can adapt it so you have a workspace too when you feel ready to start with Rebecca." The coffee arrived. Decaf for Charlotte, double espresso for Alexander. The barista, already familiar with the couple, included a blueberry muffin, complimentary to the house. "You know what impresses me most?" Charlotte commented, savoring the muffin. "How lighter you seem here. More yourself." Alexander thought about it. It was true. Ever since they left New York, it felt like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. There was no longer the constant pressure from Gregory Crawford, the suffocating expectations of high society, the endless meetings about projects he didn't believe in. "It's because I'm finally living the life I chose," he replied, "not the one chosen for me." Charlotte covered his hand with hers. "Even with all the challenges, your father's threats, starting from scratch." "Especially because of that," he interrupted softly. "Every challenge we face together only proves that we made the right choice." Nathan chose this moment to deliver a particularly hard kick, making Charlotte laugh. "I think he agrees." Leaving the cafe, they immersed themselves in the Denver autumn afternoon. The golden leaves danced in the gentle breeze, and the mountains in the background seemed like silent guardians of their new beginning. "Home?" Alexander asked, helping Charlotte into the car. "Home," she agreed, knowing that, for the first time in a long time, that word meant so much more than just a place to live. Moving into their new home in Cherry Creek happened on a sunny fall Saturday. Charlotte watched from the porch as the moving team unloaded the few belongings they had brought from New York, mixed in with the newly acquired furniture that Alexander had carefully selected for his new home. "Mrs. Crawford left this for you," said Marcus, the architect, handing over an elegantly wrapped package. "Arrived at the office this morning." Charlotte felt her heart quicken as she recognized Barbara's exquisite handwriting on the card that accompanied the gift. Inside the box, he found an old family album full of photographs of Alexander as a child. Attached was a note. "So that Nathan knows his roots, even if he grows up far from Manhattan." "Gifts from Grandma?" Alexander asked, approaching with a toolbox. He had insisted on personally assembling some furniture for the baby's room. "Yes," Charlotte replied, showing the album. "Your mother has been trying hard to stay in touch." Alexander flipped through the yellowed pages. a nostalgic smile on his face. That was in Aspen. He pointed to a photo where, at about 5 years old, he was building a snowman. We spent every Christmas at Mom's family's country house. Charlotte felt a pang of guilt for not yet revealing about the property transfer. Before he could muster up the courage to bring up the subject, the doorbell rang. "Must be the decorator," Alexander commented, standing up. "Rebecca said she's the best in Denver." But when he opened the door, it wasn't the decorator waiting outside. Gregory Crawford, impeccable in his Italian suit, stared at his son with an expression that mixed authority and disdain. "So that's it?" he asked, looking around the house. "Traded an empire for suburbia?" "Father," Alexander replied tensely, "what are you doing here?" Gregory entered uninvited, his eyes scanning the partially furnished room critically. "I've come to bring you an ultimatum. The board meets on Monday. Your last chance to reverse this madness and resume your place in the company." Charlotte instinctively placed her hand on her stomach, feeling Nathan stir. The movement did not go unnoticed by Gregory, who stared at her coldly. "And as for you, Miss Bennett, we have a generous offer: lifetime pension, private school for the child, apartment in Denver, all in exchange for discretion and appropriate distance." "Enough!" Alexander exploded, placing himself between Charlotte and her father. "You have no right to invade our home and make threats." "Home?" Gregory laughed humorlessly. "Is this what you call home? Your apartment in Manhattan was bigger than that." "The difference," Charlotte interjected, surprising them both with her calmness, "is that here he is free. Free to build something meaningful, something of his own." Gregory turned to her, his eyes as cold as winter in Manhattan. "And you think you understand my son better than I do? Alexander was born to lead Crawford Enterprises. It's in his blood." "No," Alexander replied firmly. "You programmed me for this, but now I'm choosing my own path." A tense silence filled the room. Outside, the movers continued their work, oblivious to the drama unfolding inside the house. "Your mother has been different since she got back from Denver," Gregory commented abruptly. "Distant, questioning. I imagine that's your influence too, Miss Bennett." Charlotte thought of the secret of the Aspen estate, of Barbara's silent courage. "Maybe your wife is just finding her own voice after 40 years. Gregory's expression hardened. "Be careful what you say, young man. You still don't realize who you're dealing with." "No, Father," Alexander interrupted. "You haven't noticed. We're no longer pieces on your board. Charlotte and I have built something real here. Love, trust, a family." "Family?" Gregory scoffed. "What do you know about family? You abandoned yours for a woman who loves me for who I am, not for what I might inherit," Alexander added. "And now, please leave our house." Gregory adjusted his suit, regaining his composure. "Monday, Alexander. Think carefully about what you're throwing away." After leaving, Charlotte collapsed on the newly delivered sofa, feeling mild contractions. Alexander rushed to his side, worried. "Are you okay? Do you want me to call Dr. Walsh?" "I'm fine," she assured, taking a deep breath. "Just stress. Nathan didn't really like Grandpa's visit either." Alexander knelt before her, resting his head on her belly. "Sorry about that, little one. I promise I'll protect you both, always." Charlotte stroked her hair, gathering her courage. "Alex, there's something I need to tell you. About your mother and Aspen." Over the next few minutes, she explained about Barbara's visit and the transfer of ownership. To his surprise, Alexander listened silently, a knowing smile forming on his face. "So that's why she's been calling so much," he concluded. "Mom always loved that house. It was the only place I saw her truly happy. Aren't you mad that I didn't tell you sooner?" "How could I?" He kissed her forehead softly. "You gave my mother something she hadn't had in decades. Choice, freedom to act on her conscience." A strong kick from Nathan made them both laugh. "I think he approves," Charlotte commented. "Of course you approve," Alexander replied, getting up to open the curtains, letting the light of Denver's afternoon bathe the room. "After all, thanks to Grandma Barbara, he'll have a special place in the mountains to build snowmen just like his dad." The doorbell rang again. This time it really was the decorator. While Alexander went to answer, Charlotte looked around the partially furnished room, the boxes still unpacked, the family album on the sofa. This house, unlike the luxurious apartment in Manhattan, already had more soul on its first day than that one had had in years. Outside, the Rocky Mountains turned golden as the sun set, silent witnesses that sometimes the greatest empires are built not on money and power, but on love and courage to choose one's own path. News of the confrontation between Alexander and Gregory Crawford spread quickly through Denver business circles. On Monday morning, as Charlotte organized her baby's room with decorator Lauren Hayes, Alexander faced a barrage of calls from concerned investors. "No, the project continues as planned," he assured for the 10th time, walking through the makeshift office downstairs. "Crawford Sustainable Developments is an independent company. Crawford Enterprises' actions do not affect us." On the other end of the line, Marcus Chen reported the latest news from the ecological condominium construction site. The foundations were being prepared, and buyers' interest only increased, especially after the innovative sustainability concept was announced. "Mr. Crawford," Lauren's voice echoed from the stairs, "Charlotte is requesting your presence. I don't think she's feeling well." Alexander took the steps 2 at a time, finding Charlotte sitting in the newly assembled nursing chair, her face pale and one hand pressed against the side of her belly. "It's just Braxton Hicks contractions," she tried to assure him, but her tense expression betrayed her. "Dr. Walsh said it was normal." "Lauren, can you give us a moment?" Alexander gently asked the decorator, who nodded and left the room. Kneeling beside Charlotte, he held her hand. "How long have you been feeling this?" "It started after your dad left yesterday," she admitted. "But it got worse this morning. And my blood pressure. I don't feel good." The mention of blood pressure reminded Alexander of Dr. Walsh's warning about preeclampsia. Without hesitation, he picked up the phone and called the doctor's office. 30 minutes later, they were in the exam room at St. Luke's Presbyterian Hospital. Dr. Walsh examined Charlotte with a worried expression, while a nurse monitored her vital signs. "The pressure is very high," the doctor confirmed, "and there's protein in the urine. These are clear signs of preeclampsia. We're going to need to admit her for monitoring." "But there's still almost 6 weeks to go," Charlotte protested, scared. "And we're going to do our best to keep Nathan in there for as long as possible," Dr. Walsh assured. "But your health and his are a priority right now. Strict rest and constant monitoring are essential." While Charlotte was prepared for hospitalization, Alexander made the necessary calls. Marcus would temporarily take over the project's in-person meetings. Rebecca was informed about the situation, and Lauren promised to finish the baby's room following the instructions already discussed. "I called your mother," Alexander mentioned softly, sitting next to the hospital bed where Charlotte was already settled. "She wants to come to Denver." Charlotte hesitated. "And your father?" "She said she'll deal with him," Alexander smiled. "Apparently, Mum has finally found her voice." The fetal monitor was emitting a rhythmic, soothing sound. Nathan seemed oblivious to the drama surrounding him. A nurse came in to check Charlotte's vitals for the 3rd time in an hour. "The important thing now is to keep you and our little warrior safe," Alexander continued, rubbing Charlotte's belly. "The rest can wait." "But what about the project, the investors?" "Marcus is perfectly capable of managing the works," he interrupted gently. "And honestly, after my dad's visit yesterday, several local investors got in touch. It seems like the news that I'm actually parting ways with Crawford Enterprises has increased our credibility in the sustainability market." A faint smile lit up Charlotte's face. "There's always a bright side, isn't there?" "Always," he agreed, leaning down to kiss her forehead. The afternoon passed slowly, marked by regular visits from the medical team and messages of support from Rebecca and Lauren. In the early evening, Barbara Crawford called again. "I bought a ticket for tomorrow morning," she informed. "And Charlotte, honey, don't worry about a thing. I've already talked to the best preeclampsia specialist in New York. She's going to consult with Dr. Walsh about your case." "Thank you, Barbara," Charlotte replied, moved. But there was no need. Yes, I did, Barbara interrupted firmly. You are my family, and for the first time in decades, I'm doing what my heart tells me, not what society expects. After hanging up, Charlotte noticed that Alexander was watching her with a peculiar smile. What is it? She asked. It's just, I've never seen my mother like this, so determined, so herself. You did this, you know? Charlotte shook her head. No, love. Your mother always had that strength inside her. She just needed a reason to use it. Night fell over Denver, and the city lights twinkled through the hospital window. Alexander refused to go home, making a bed on the sofa in his room. The soft sound of the fetal monitor and Charlotte's steady breathing eventually lulled him into a light sleep. He was awakened a few hours later by a sudden movement. Charlotte was sitting on the bed, an expression of discomfort on her face. "Alex," she called, her voice tense. "I think we need to call Dr. Walsh. Something's not right." The fetal monitor began emitting alerts, and within seconds the medical team burst into the room. As he watched the professionals work, Alexander felt a mix of fear and determination. No matter what lay ahead, family empire, sustainable projects, media scandals, nothing was more important than the safety of his family. Outside, the first light of dawn began to touch the Rocky Mountains, promising a new day and new challenges. But this time, they would not be alone to face them. The fetal monitor alarm continued to sound as Dr. Walsh and her team examined Charlotte with focused expressions. Alexander held his beloved's hand tightly, feeling her squeeze tightly with each contraction that intensified. "Blood pressure is rising dangerously," Dr. Walsh announced, checking the monitors. "And the baby is showing signs of fetal distress. We need to perform an emergency C-section." "But it's too soon," Charlotte protested, tears streaming down her pale face. "He's only 34 weeks. Our neonatal ICU is one of the best in Colorado," assured the doctor as the team prepared the transfer to the surgical center. "Nathan will have all the necessary care." Alexander kissed Charlotte's forehead, trying to convey a calmness he didn't feel. "I'll be with you the whole time, love. You two are strong. You'll make it." While the medical team prepared Charlotte for surgery, Alexander took a moment to call Barbara, who was already on her way to the airport in New York. "I'm boarding the first flight," she assured, her voice tight with worry. "Gregory tried to stop me, but this time I won't give in. My family needs me." In the operating room, under the bright lights, Alexander, now dressed in sterile scrubs, sat next to Charlotte's head. The anesthesia had already taken effect, and Dr. Walsh was beginning the procedure. "Talk to her," advised the anesthetist. "It helps you stay calm." "Remember our first conversation in Denver?" Alexander began, stroking Charlotte's hair. "You were serving drinks at that sustainable architecture exhibition, and I couldn't stop looking at your smile." Charlotte tried to smile through her fear. "You spilled champagne all over your expensive suit, and it was the best stain I've ever made on a garment," he laughed softly, "because it gave me an excuse to keep talking to you." A sharp noise from the monitor interrupted the moment. "Pressure falling," warned one of the doctors. "We're going to need to be quick," Dr. Walsh commanded. "Prepare the transfusion." The next few minutes seemed like an eternity. Alexander kept his eyes fixed on Charlotte, whispering words of love and encouragement as the medical team worked with surgical precision. Finally, a weak but determined cry filled the room. "It's a boy," Dr. Walsh announced, holding up a tiny but perfectly formed baby. "He's so little," Charlotte whispered, tears streaming down her face as the neonatal team quickly assessed Nathan. 2 kilos and 300 grams, informed one of the pediatricians. "We're taking him to the NICU now. Dad, do you want to cut the cord?" With shaking hands, Alexander cut the umbilical cord, feeling an overwhelming emotion as he saw his son for the first time. Nathan had dark fuzz covering his head, and even though he was premature, his features clearly resembled Charlotte's. "He's beautiful," Alexander whispered, returning to Charlotte's side. "Our little warrior." But something was wrong. The monitors began to beep frantically, and Charlotte's face was increasingly pale. "Hemorrhage," Dr. Walsh warned. "We need more blood here. Mr. Crawford, please wait outside." "No, I need to stay," he protested, but was gently led out of the room by a nurse. In the hallway, Alexander leaned against the wall, feeling his legs weaken. Her son had been born, but Charlotte was fighting for her life. How had it gotten to this point? Just 2 days ago, they were decorating the baby's room, planning the future. Barbara arrived at the hospital 2 hours later, finding Alexander sitting in the NICU waiting room, his face etched with worry and exhaustion. "How are they?" she asked, sitting down next to her son. "Nathan is stable. The doctors say his lungs are surprisingly mature for a preemie," Alexander replied, his voice hoarse. "Charlotte. She lost a lot of blood. She's still recovering." Barbara held her son's hand, offering the silent comfort that only a mother can give. "She's strong, honey. They both are." A nurse appeared at the door. "Mr. Crawford, your wife is awake and asking about the baby, and little Nathan is ready for his first ICU visits." Alexander stood up, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. Barbara hugged him tightly. "Go see Charlotte first," she directed. "Then we'll go meet my grandson together." In the recovery room, Charlotte was pale but conscious. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw Alexander. "Nathan," was the first word he managed to form. "He's perfect," Alexander assured him, kissing her hand. "Small, but strong like his mother. He's in the neonatal ICU, but the doctors are optimistic." "I want to see him." Charlotte tried to move, but grimaced in pain. "Soon," he promised, "as soon as you're stronger. Barbara's here, by the way." A small smile appeared on Charlotte's face. "Your mom is amazing. She left everything to come and support us." "She's finally making her own choices," Alexander commented, "just like I did when I chose you." Over the next few hours, while Charlotte rested, Alexander and Barbara took turns visiting the NICU and recovery room. Nathan, although small, demonstrated surprising strength, responding well to treatments. "He has your eyes," Barbara commented, watching her grandson through the glass of the incubator. "And the stubborn Crawford chin." "But the heart is like a mother's," Alexander replied, gently touching his son's tiny hand, strong and determined. Across town, in the newly furnished house in Cherry Creek, Lauren continued the final details of the baby's room, following Charlotte's instructions. The crib would patiently await the return of its little occupant, as the Crawford-Bennett family faced their first challenges together, united by a love that proved stronger than any business empire. The days in the neonatal ICU had their own rhythm, marked by the rhythmic sounds of the monitors and the silent comings and goings of the medical team. Charlotte, still recovering from emergency surgery, was transported in a wheelchair 3 times a day to see Nathan, moments that became the highlight of her hospital routine. "He's gained 30 grams since yesterday," Nurse Rachel informed, gently adjusting the tubes monitoring the little warrior. "And he's responding very well to the kangaroo method." Charlotte watched through the glass of the incubator as Alexander, sitting in a special recliner, held Nathan against his bare chest, providing the skin-to-skin contact that was crucial for premature babies. The contrast between Alexander's large hands and his son's tiny body was touching. "Your milk is helping a lot too," Rachel continued. "Even though he can't breastfeed directly yet, every drop we pump is a gift for his development." Barbara, who had practically moved to Denver, alternated her time between helping organize the house in Cherry Creek and providing support at the hospital. Her discreet but constant presence surprised everyone who knew the old version of the Crawford matriarch. "I brought you something," she announced that afternoon, walking into the ICU with an elegant bag. From inside, he took out a small light blue cashmere blanket. This was Alexander's first blanket. My mother hand-knitted it when he was born. Charlotte felt tears escape as she touched the soft fabric. "It's beautiful, Barbara." "Nathan needs something that carries the family history," Barbara explained, her own eyes welling up. "The good part of the story, I mean." The moment was interrupted by Alexander's cell phone. It was Marcus Chen, with updates on the sustainable condo project. Despite the circumstances, The investors had shown themselves to be understanding, and the works continued to progress. The solar panels arrive next week, Marcus reported, and we had 3 more units sold yesterday. People are really excited about the concept of eco-friendly housing. Great work, Marcus, Alexander replied, still cradling Nathan. Continue to keep everything on track. Once Charlotte and Nathan are discharged, I plan to gradually return to the office. The mention of medical discharge made Charlotte look hopefully at Rachel, who was smiling as she checked the baby's vital signs. If he continues to progress like this, the nurse commented, we can begin discussing the possibility of discharge in the next few weeks. Of course, we will still need regular monitoring, but... Weeks? Charlotte interrupted, her heart racing with hope. Nathan is a fighter, Rachel confirmed. His lungs are maturing well, he maintains his body temperature, and his weight gain is as expected. Barbara discreetly wiped away a tear. I'm going to finish organizing his room today. Lauren did an amazing job, but there are still a few details left. The rest of the afternoon passed in a mix of hope and anxiety. Charlotte was finally able to do kangaroo care with Nathan for the first time since birth, an experience that left her emotionally overwhelmed. He recognizes me, she whispered in wonder, feeling her son snuggle against her chest. Feel my heart beating. Alexander watched the scene with a love that almost hurt when his phone vibrated again. It was a text message from Gregory Crawford. The board voted today. You are officially removed from office. There is still time to reverse this. Bad news? Charlotte asked, noticing his tense expression. On the contrary, he replied, putting away his cell phone. This is the official end of my ties with Crawford Enterprises. I can now completely focus on what really matters. Barbara, who was arranging the cashmere blanket in the incubator, stopped her movements. Gregory will try to use this against you in the inheritance dispute. Try it, Alexander shrugged. I have excellent lawyers. Plus, the Aspen estate is already secured for Nathan. Thanks to you, Mum. The sound of Nathan's heart monitor sped up slightly, as if the baby responded to the mention of his name. Rachel quickly checked the devices, but smiled reassuringly. It's okay, she assured. He's just more alert. It's a great sign, actually. As night fell over Denver, Barbara insisted that Alexander and Charlotte go home to get a proper rest, promising to stay with Nathan through the night. It was the first time the couple would return home together since their birth. The Cherry Creek home welcomed them with a comforting scent of lavender, courtesy of Lauren, who had installed diffusers throughout the room. Nathan's room was ready, decorated in soft shades of blue and green, with a hand-painted mural of mountains on one wall. It feels surreal, Charlotte commented, sitting in the nursing chair. 2 weeks ago, we were just starting to decorate this room. Now our son is out in the world, fighting like a true warrior. Alexander knelt beside her, resting his head in her lap. He takes after his mother. You two are the strongest warriors I know. And you are our rock, she replied, running her fingers through his hair. I don't know how I would have gotten through all this without you. The moment was interrupted by the intercom. It was a special delivery. Alexander went downstairs to receive and returned with an elegant package from Tiffany & Co. It's your mother's, Charlotte said in surprise, reading the card that came with the box. Inside, they found a delicate gold pendant with 3 small stones, a diamond, a sapphire, and an emerald. The note explained, to represent 3 new beginnings, your love, Nathan's birth, and our family together in a new way. That night, lying in their own bed for the first time in weeks, Charlotte and Alexander made plans for the future, not grand like the Crawfords' old plans, but meaningful in their simplicity and love. In the NICU, Barbara watched over her grandson's sleep, softly humming the same lullabies she used to sing to Alexander, while the Rocky Mountains stood silent guard over the sleeping town. The first week of December brought a notable change in the NICU. Nathan, now almost 3 weeks old, had reached the 2-pound 6-ounce mark, progress that made the medical team consider gradually reducing respiratory support. He's practically breathing on his own, Dr. Walsh explained during the morning visit. If this continues, we can begin the transition to a common birth in the next few days. Charlotte, who spent more and more time in kangaroo care with her son, felt her heart overflow with joy with each small achievement. Skin-to-skin moments had become sacred, times when the outside world simply disappeared, and there was only her and her little warrior. The results of the latest exams are also excellent, the doctor continued, reviewing the medical records. Brain function is perfect, and lungs continue to mature as expected. Alexander, who divided his time between the hospital and the developer's office, arrived in time to hear the good news. Her tired face lit up when she saw Nathan tightly gripping her finger as it rested on Charlotte's lap. "We received environmental certification today," he commented softly, not wanting to disturb the peaceful moment between mother and son. "The condominium will be the first in Denver to achieve platinum-level sustainability." Barbara, who was methodically organizing Nathan's tiny clothes on a dresser next to the incubator, smiled with pride. Gregory never understood that success isn't just measured in dollars. The mention of Alexander's father brought momentary tension to the atmosphere. In the last week, Gregory Crawford had intensified his pressure attempts, now targeting Crawford Sustainable Development suppliers. "Marcus got new partners for the project," Alexander continued, determined not to let his father's maneuvers affect his mood. "Smaller companies, more aligned with our vision of sustainability." "What about the house?" Charlotte asked, adjusting Nathan against her chest when he started to get restless. "Lauren finished the final details yesterday. The solar heating system is installed, and the vertical garden on the back porch is already starting to bloom." Nurse Rachel approached with a conspiratorial smile. "Speaking of home, I have a surprise for you. Dr. Walsh has authorized a test. Nathan can try his first direct feed today." The announcement brought immediate tears to Charlotte. From birth, all breast milk was offered through tubes, a necessary but emotionally challenging process for a mother who longed for that special connection with her child. With Rachel's patient guidance, Nathan was positioned correctly. At first he seemed confused by the new experience, but soon his natural instinct prevailed, and he began to suck gently. "Look," Barbara whispered, excited. "He knows exactly what to do." Alexander watched the scene with a lump in his throat, marveling at the intimacy of the moment. Seeing Charlotte and Nathan finally sharing this fundamental connection made all the turmoil of the last few months seem like a small price to pay. "If he keeps up this pace," Rachel commented, checking the monitors, "we can start planning for discharge for next week." The possibility of finally taking Nathan home provoked a mixture of joy and apprehension. The room was ready, equipped with all the necessary monitoring devices, but the idea of not having the medical team nearby 24 hours a day was intimidating. "We will do complete training with you before discharge," assured Rachel, noticing the couple's anxiety. "And we will have home visits from nursing staff in the first few weeks." Barbara immediately went into organizational mode. "I'm going to hire a private nurse for night shifts, and I've already researched the best pediatricians specializing in premature babies in Denver." "Mom," Alexander interrupted gently, "let's take it one thing at a time." The rest of the afternoon was spent learning Nathan's cues, his different types of crying, his facial expressions, the way he moved when he was uncomfortable. Every little detail was a new discovery, a step closer to fully understanding that small and beloved being. As night began to fall, bringing with it Denver's first snow of the winter, Charlotte watched the white flakes through the ICU window, still cradling Nathan after his second successful feeding of the day. "Next winter," she whispered to her son, "I'm going to teach you how to make snow angels in your backyard, and when you're older, we're going to go skiing in Aspen, at the house your grandma Barbara gave you as a gift." Alexander, who was returning with coffees for everyone, stopped at the door to admire the scene. The contrast between the soft blue of the cashmere blanket and the delicate pink of Nathan's skin, the way Charlotte hummed softly, the snow falling silently outside. It was a picture he wanted to keep in his memory forever. "Come to think of it," Barbara commented, approaching her son, "maybe you inherited something important from your father after all." "What?" Alexander asked, curious. "The ability to recognize the true value of things," she replied, watching Charlotte and Nathan. "Some fortunes cannot be measured in shares or property. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering Denver with a blanket of white that seemed to cleanse the air and renew promise. In the neonatal ICU, a family rebuilt on foundations more solid than any business empire celebrated every small victory, every precious moment, every step towards a future that, although different from what was planned, revealed itself to be infinitely richer in meaning. The news of Nathan's hospital discharge came on a Thursday morning, when the first rays of sunlight leaked through the windows of the neonatal ICU. At just over 4 weeks old and weighing almost 3 kilos, the little warrior had exceeded all medical expectations. "Remember," Dr. Walsh emphasized during the last appointment, "even though he is going home, Nathan still needs special care. The first few months will be crucial to his development." Charlotte absorbed every word, while Alexander took meticulous notes on his tablet. Barbara, always practical, had already organized a roster of specialized nurses for the first 30 days at home. "The cardiorespiratory monitor must be on 24 hours, continued the doctor, "and feedings need to be strictly recorded. Any change in body temperature, even if small, deserves immediate attention." Rachel, who had practically become part of the family during her hospitalization, helped Charlotte organize the belongings that had accumulated over the last few weeks. The Crawfords' cashmere blanket, dozens of premature bodies, and the little stuffed bear that wouldn't leave the incubator. "I'm going to miss that face," the nurse commented, adjusting the woolen hat on Nathan's head. "But I'm glad you can finally be a complete family at home." The morning passed in a whirlwind of final instructions, signing documents and checking equipment. Marcus Chen quickly arrived with a surprise gift from the developers team, a handmade mobile made from miniature solar panels and wind turbines. For him to grow up aware of sustainability, Marcus joked, but his eyes betrayed his emotion when he saw little Nathan awake and alert in his crib. While Charlotte was breastfeeding Nathan one last time in the hospital, Alexander received an unexpected call. The identifier showed Gregory Crawford's office number. "Son," his father's voice sounded tired, "I heard Nathan was discharged today." Alexander felt his body tense. "Like you." "Your mother told me," Gregory interrupted. She's been keeping me updated on her grandson. Against my will, I must admit." A heavy silence fell on the line. Alexander could hear his father's ragged breathing, as if he was struggling with difficult words to pronounce. "Maybe," Gregory continued hesitantly, "maybe I could meet him. Someday." The surprise made Alexander lean against the nearest wall. "Dad, you sued me out of the company. You're trying to block my suppliers." "Business is business," Gregory responded automatically, but his voice cracked. "Family is different." Barbara, who was passing by carrying the baby's bag, stopped when she saw her son's expression. Alexander covered the phone with his hand. "It's the father. He wants to meet Nathan." Barbara's face softened with understanding. Over the past few weeks, she had witnessed a transformation in Gregory, small changes that others might not notice, but that to a wife of 40 years were clear as day. "Let's think about it," Alexander finally replied to his father, "but with our conditions. Nathan will not be used as a bargaining chip." "I see," Gregory replied, his voice softer than usual. "And congratulations on the project's environmental certification. I read about it in the newspaper." The call ended, leaving Alexander with a confused mix of emotions. Charlotte, who had finished breastfeeding, was watching him curiously. "Your father?" she asked softly. "Apparently, even the most rigid empires can have cracks," he replied, moving closer to kiss his son's forehead. The moment of departure arrived with a mixture of anxiety and gratitude. The neonatal ICU team gathered for a last photo with the little warrior, a tradition with all babies who were discharged. Rachel couldn't hold back her tears as she said goodbye. "Remember," she said, adjusting the portable monitor's sensors one last time, "you can call me any time, day or night." The journey home was silent and careful, with Alexander driving as if carrying the most precious of treasures, which indeed he was. Charlotte sat in the back seat next to the special seat for preemies, her hand rarely leaving Nathan's chest to monitor his breathing. The Cherry Creek home welcomed them with a discreet banner at the entrance. "Welcome home, Nathan," the work of Lauren, who had personally supervised the last cleaning of the environment. Every room was cleaned with hypoallergenic products, Barbara explained as they went upstairs to the baby's room. "The humidifier keeps the air at the ideal temperature and humidity, and we install HEPA filters throughout the ventilation system." The room, bathed in the soft light of the winter afternoon, seemed even more welcoming than in the photos Charlotte saw during her hospitalization. The mountain mural now had small gold details that sparkled in the light, and the renewable energy mobile rotated gently above the crib. "Welcome to your kingdom, little prince," Alexander whispered, helping Charlotte settle Nathan into his crib for the first time. The baby blinked a few times, seemingly intrigued by his new surroundings, before falling into a peaceful sleep. His parents and grandmother remained completely silent, watching his rhythmic breathing and the small movements of his tiny fingers. "I think now," Barbara commented softly, "the Crawford story really begins to be rewritten." Nathan's first month at home established a carefully orchestrated routine. The cardiorespiratory monitors became a constant soundtrack, marking the little warrior's every breath as he continued to surprise everyone with his development. "He's gained almost a pound since discharge," Charlotte commented during Dr. Walsh's weekly visit, watching proudly as the doctor examined Nathan. "And he's breastfeeding better and better." "His adaptation is exceptional," confirmed the doctor, smiling when she saw the baby firmly gripping his stethoscope. "You guys are doing an amazing job." Life at the Cherry Creek house had found its own rhythm. Barbara, who had decided to extend her stay in Denver indefinitely, occupied the guest suite and was an extraordinarily present grandmother. Her transformation from Manhattan socialite to Grandma Barbara was the subject of whispered conversation in New York social circles. Alexander divided his time between the developer's office and his home office, actively participating in Nathan's care. The sustainable condominium project was advancing quickly, and the first structures were already beginning to take shape on the Denver skyline. "Marcus sent the latest photos of the work," he commented over breakfast, showing his tablet to Charlotte. "The solar panels are practically all installed, and the rainwater collection system is exceeding initial expectations." It was at that moment that Barbara entered the kitchen with a worried expression, her cell phone in hand. "Gregory is coming to Denver." The silence that followed was broken only by the soft beeping of Nathan's monitor in the baby carrier next to the table. "When?" Alexander asked, his voice tense. "This afternoon," Barbara replied, sitting down heavily. He said he wants to meet his grandson and discuss some unfinished business." Charlotte instinctively brought the comfort baby closer, as if to protect Nathan from the approaching storm. "What outstanding issues?" "Apparently," Barbara continued, "the Crawford Enterprises board is divided. The company's stock has continued to decline since Alexander's departure, and some shareholders have begun to question Gregory's leadership." Alexander let out a humorless laugh. "So that's it. He's not coming for Nathan. He's coming to try to win me back to the company." "Don't be so quick to judge, son," Barbara intervened softly. "Your father has changed in his own way." The following hours were tense. Charlotte obsessively organized and reorganized Nathan's room, while Alexander alternated between calls with his lawyers and moments of silent contemplation at his son's crib. Gregory Crawford arrived punctually at 3 p.m, his rented Bentley, a contrast to the more modest cars in the neighborhood. Upon entering the room, his gaze roamed the room, noticing the sustainable details that Alexander had implemented in the renovation: the thermally insulated windows, the LED lighting fixtures, the automation system that optimized energy consumption. "Interesting," he commented, his voice softer than usual. "Different from what I imagined." Barbara led her husband to the main armchair, while Charlotte, with Nathan in her arms, remained close to the stairs, ready to go up at the first sign of the baby's stress. Alexander strategically positioned himself between his father and his family. "Nathan is sleeping," Charlotte informed softly. "Just finished feeding." Gregory stood up slowly, approaching with a hesitation unusual in his usually dominant stance. When his eyes fell on his grandson for the first time, something in his expression subtly changed. "He has your eyes, Alexander," he murmured, taking in the baby's delicate features, "and the Crawford chin." "And the mother's strength," Alexander added, his voice firm but not hostile. Gregory cleared his throat, sitting back down. "The board meets next week. They want to discuss restructuring the company." "Father," Alexander began, but Gregory raised his hand. "Let me finish. They proposed a split. Crawford Enterprises would continue traditional ventures under my direction, while a new subsidiary focused on sustainable development would be created, under your leadership." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken possibilities. Charlotte watched the scene with her heart racing, feeling Nathan move uneasily in her arms. "Why now?" Alexander finally asked. "Because," Gregory replied after a moment's reflection, "your Denver project proved that sustainability can be profitable, and because—" He looked back at Nathan. "Some things are more important than pride." Barbara silently wiped away a tear, while Charlotte felt her own emotion rise. Alexander remained silent, processing the proposal and its implications. "Would I need to move back to New York?" he finally asked. "Not necessarily," Gregory replied. "The subsidiary could be based in Denver. In fact, it would be more consistent with its sustainability proposition." Nathan chose this moment to wake up, his little eyes opening curiously to his surroundings. Gregory stood up again, this time with more confidence. Can I hold him?" Charlotte exchanged a look with Alexander, who nodded slightly. Carefully, she transferred Nathan into his grandfather's arms, showing him how to properly support his head. The moment Gregory Crawford held his grandson for the first time would be etched in the memories of everyone present. The powerful businessman, accustomed to controlling financial empires, seemed completely transformed by the little life in his arms. "Welcome to the family, Nathan," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "I'm sorry it took Grandpa so long to meet you." The first rays of the Denver spring sun illuminated the front yard of the Cherry Creek home, where Nathan, now 6 months old, explored the world from his activity mat set up on the porch. Charlotte watched in amazement as her son tried to reach the mobile's miniature solar panels, his green eyes, identical to his father's, sparkling with curiosity. "He's getting stronger and stronger," Barbara commented, pouring iced tea into tall glasses decorated with mint leaves from the vertical garden. "I can hardly believe it's the same little baby from the ICU." The last few months had been transformative for everyone. Crawford's sustainable developments had expanded significantly, with 3 new projects under development in different states. The pioneering Denver condominium was nearing completion, with all units sold and a growing waiting list for future developments. Alexander emerged from his home office, where he had just finished a video conference with Gregory and the board of Crawford Enterprises. The new corporate structure was working surprisingly well, with father and son finding a balance between tradition and innovation. "How was the meeting?" Charlotte asked, picking Nathan up when he began to show signs of hunger. "Productive," Alexander smiled, sitting down next to them. "The board unanimously approved expansion to the West Coast. San Francisco will be our next destination." Barbara watched the scene with obvious satisfaction. The transformation in her own life had been equally significant. After 40 years as the perfect Manhattan wife, she now divided her time between New York and Denver, finding new purpose as a grandmother and informal advisor to her son's sustainable projects. "Gregory asked about the christening party," she mentioned, trying to sound casual. "He wants to know if he can bring some board members." Charlotte and Alexander exchanged amused glances. The change in Gregory Crawford in recent months had surprised everyone. The hard-nosed businessman gradually gave way to a proud grandfather who never missed an opportunity to show photos of Nathan to anyone who showed the slightest interest. "As long as he doesn't turn this into a business meeting," Alexander joked, but his tone was affectionate. "Nathan deserves a day of his own." As if understanding that he was being the topic of conversation, the baby let out a happy little scream, making everyone laugh. Charlotte adjusted him to breastfeed, a routine that he now performed naturally, far from the tense days of the neonatal ICU. "Rebecca called earlier," she commented, stroking her son's dark hair. "The events company is expanding to Boulder, and they want me to lead the new office when I feel ready to return." "And do you want it?" Alexander asked softly, knowing well his wife's internal conflict between career and motherhood. "Maybe part-time initially," Charlotte replied thoughtfully. "Nathan is still little, and I want to enjoy every moment, but it would be nice to have something of my own again." Barbara stood up, collecting the empty glasses. "You will always have support, dear, whatever you decide." The sound of the intercom interrupted the conversation. It was Marcus Chen, bringing the latest photographs of the condominium for final approval of the marketing material. The images showed a residential complex that perfectly harmonized sustainable technology with architectural beauty. "Buyers are especially interested in the community compost system and organic garden," Marcus explained, spreading out the photos on the porch table. "And local schools have already scheduled educational visits for next semester." Nathan, who had finished breastfeeding, was curiously watching the colorful images. Alexander picked him up, showing him the photographs. "See, son, this is the legacy we are building for you. A more conscious, more sustainable world." "And more loving," Charlotte added softly, watching father and son. The rest of the afternoon passed in productive peace. Marcus and Alexander finalized the details of the promotional material, while Charlotte and Barbara organized the final preparations for the christening. Nathan alternated between naps and moments of intense curiosity about everything around him. As the sun began to set, painting the Rockies with shades of pink and gold, the family gathered on the porch for their daily ritual of appreciating the end of the day. Nathan, drowsy in Charlotte's arms, held tight to the small stuffed bear that had accompanied him from the ICU. "Do you know what impresses me most?" Barbara commented, observing her grandson. "How one person so small can change so many lives." Alexander enveloped Charlotte and Nathan in a gentle hug. "He taught us what really matters. It's not business empires or bank accounts. It's the little moments," Charlotte added, "the first laughs, the sleepless nights, every little achievement." Nathan's heart rate monitor, now worn only during sleep as a precaution, was beeping softly and steadily, a reminder of the warrior he had been since day one. Her story of struggle and overcoming had become an inspiration not only to the family, but to other families in the neonatal ICU, where Barbara now did regular volunteer work. To Nathan, Alexander raised his tea glass in an impromptu toast. "The little warrior who taught us to fight for what really matters." "For love," Charlotte added, "which overcomes any obstacle." "To family," Barbara added, "in all its forms." As night fell over Denver, enveloping the Cherry Creek home in its serenity, the Crawford Bennett family silently celebrated their victories, not the ones measured in dollars or newspaper headlines, but the ones told in smiles, hugs, and moments of pure happiness. Nathan slept peacefully, oblivious to the fact that his arrival had not only united a family, but also redefined the meaning of success for everyone around him. On the horizon, the lights of the sustainable condominium began to come on, a beacon of hope for a future where progress and environmental awareness go hand in hand. And so, under the starry sky of Colorado, a new story continued to be written, no longer about empires and fortunes, but about love, courage, and the transformative power of choosing one's own path.